What made us sign up for marriage counseling?
Marriage is so interesting because we've been married for 8 years, and like, it's a good marriage, right?
It's a great marriage.
Yeah, I agree. But then there would be certain things that came up. My first instinct would always be defensive. She'd be like, I feel like you're doing this. And I'd be like, I'm not doing that. Quit saying that. And then at a certain point, I was like, you know what? I actually don't think I have the right perspective to know whether I am doing that or not. And I don't want to do that if it hurts you. So let's try to go to a third party to get it fixed.
And I would say the same thing was happening for me. I felt like zoom out a little bit. We had our first kid. We went through a rough transition, figured it out. We had our second kid. We knew that that was coming. So I felt like we were able to navigate it a little better. Still went through it because the transition is just rough. Third kid, we were like, I know this is coming. How are we going to navigate it? And I feel like we just kind of got to a point in our marriage where the repetition of disagreements, defensiveness, it felt too much like deja vu for both of us. What I was trying to say wasn't getting across. What he was trying to say wasn't getting across. And you're so tired by the third kid. It's kind of like, okay, instead of just skirting this issue and waiting for the next round, let's go figure it out. And it wasn't like super bad. I don't mean it that way. It was just like, you can only have the same argument enough times where it's like, let's just go figure out what the issue is.
Yeah. I think you said on a previous podcast, we're not in a place of desperation. And so we're getting counseling to keep it that way.
Yes.
But one thing I've learned is being on the same page emotionally is not an efficient exercise. It takes a long time to figure out what you're feeling individually, and then for the other person to try to figure out what they're feeling, and then to try to find the right words to communicate that in a way that doesn't get lost in translation. It's an inefficient thing that I think pre-kids, Sean and I had the time for, to sit down and like have a 2.5 hour conversation about, hey, this hurt my feelings. Did you mean that? Can you explain more or whatever? And then you have the first kid, you have a little less time, second kid, a little less time. So then things kind of just start stacking. You got like stuff that just gets shoved in the closet kind of. So we wanted to invest in like both an expertise and a window of time to work that out. And it's been phenomenal. And this is another thing I learned. I'm going to go on a tangent. I've been thinking about what it means to be a man in a marriage. It's not about being perfect. I think I would always tell you that I never thought that, but I felt it. That you gotta show up every day, you gotta happy wife, happy life, and you gotta do X, Y, Z. And it's like, no, I'm gonna let Sean down. So what does it mean to be a man if you can't be perfect? Okay, that kind of stripped my whole foundation of the understanding. And I realized I couldn't be that for her. So now I'm shooting for the idea that it is a manly thing to do, to have the awareness that I have blind spots that I might not know about, and have the humility to address those blind spots in the best way that I know how. Takes courage, and that's what it means to be a man. Yes.
That. You're speaking for yourself, which is wonderful, but I also want to say it's just as much me on every front. I want to make sure that people listening, I don't want to allow you to paint this picture like it's you that we went to counseling for.
Oh, I'm glad you said that.
It was.
I agree. No, I get it.
It's us. And I was noticing within myself, too, that whenever we would have arguments, it's like, why am I reacting this way? I want to fix me so that I can be a better wife to you.
Well, what I know is I don't have any control over you. And I probably shouldn't. It's probably healthy for me not to have any control, even though I want to have control and be like, just listen to what I say and do what I want. You know, like that's kind of the instinct. It's easier that way. That's not how it works. And it's not how it should work because the outcome is not as beautiful as a compromise when we both partake in the decision. So I'm trying to control what I can control, which is my partake.
Moving on. How do you go from being long distance to being together every day once you get married?
Do you remember this? Oh my gosh.
It was rough.
The transitions were always so full of friction for us. Oh man.
When you get used to being independent and living life your own particular way, and you transition to a life where you're merging two people's ways, is really difficult. I would just say practice. Every single day, take a deep breath, figure out where you're going to compromise, figure out how you're going to merge, but it can't be your way or it can't be his way. It literally has to be like your combined new lifestyle. And that takes a while to figure out.
I agree. I think we really got hung up on like the communicating our emotions correctly. A lot of times if I was leaving and I was worked up or vice versa, I'd be like, well, I'm just sad you're leaving. But it came out as like frustration or anger. I remembered what I was going to say. One thing that I've realized in counseling is when Sean or I get worked up about a thing, instead of being frustrated or taking it personally, approaching that with an aspect of curiosity, like why does that hotspot exist? And let's talk about that.